Welcome to Around the Kitchen Table with Happy Herbs. My name is Rochelle. I'm a certified herbalist and the owner and founder of Happy Herbs. Today, I am here with Brittany. She is a wife, a mother of 4, and a doula. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Brittany. My name's Brittany, and I am a doula, a sovereign doula actually, and I work as a birth doula and a postpartum doula, mainly with women who are birthing outside the medical system. So I have been a doula now for about 5 years. I started out doing a little bit more postpartum, and then I started at birth. And I feel like you had asked like how if I was a regular doula before I started doing this work. I had barely been a doula for before I decided that what I was seeing inside the system wasn't what I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
And I was witnessing for lack of better words, abuse and women not being heard and valued. And they were leaving the system just feeling like a piece of them was missing.
Yeah.
And this
Trauma.
And this was also leaving them unable to care for their babies or like the feeling like their body was broken and
postpartum depression.
This went on into like well into their mothering journey.
Yeah.
So and I speak not only to this just by what I saw, but what I experienced with my own journey with my daughter.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
when I had my daughter, when I got pregnant in 2012, I didn't grow up with a lot of like feminine influence in my home.
Okay.
So I didn't really have a lot to go on. And with the women that I did have in my life, like when they had their babies, they just went to the hospital and got the epidural and they had pretty simple, straightforward births and they were content with their births. So I thought that was going to be my experience. And when I was 40 weeks pregnant, and then 41 weeks pregnant and where's baby? I started to feel a lot of pressure from my doctor. And it kind of led me feeling like, well, like why? Like, why is there so much pressure to have my baby? And excuse me, I gotta take a breath. Like, why am I feeling all this pressure? And why is my doctor thinking like something else needs to be done?
Right.
So, long story short, I didn't really have many options. I felt like I didn't have options.
Yeah.
I ended up having an emergency C-section.
Okay.
Which now in hindsight, I feel like maybe wasn't like an emergency.
Yeah.
And was maybe caused a little bit by some of the procedures that they were.
The interventions.
Yeah.
And what were those interventions?
So it started out with a little bit of Cervidil, which is like a cervix ripening ointment that they use, medication that they use. And that actually kickstarted my labor, but it wasn't like natural. It was very like strong, which I now know is like uterine overstimulation, right? So I went into it and it was like hard and fast and my baby wasn't tolerating well. So now, now there's like the next intervention. Okay, well, it was the contractions were so strong. So I was like, I need my epidural like now.
For sure. They're forced, right? And
and then that slows down labor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but baby is still like feeling those strong contractions.
Absolutely. And baby's getting those drugs too, you know?
Right? Yeah, but they're still feeling like the intense pressure that's happening,
Absolutely.
Right? So yeah, it just was like one thing after the other. And then it was like, okay, her heart rate's she's not tolerating this well. I'm tired, right? So I ended up having a C-section after we saw some like pretty serious heart accelerations, right? So, and then so they do the procedure, and I'll spare the details there. And then, like my baby's brought over to me completely swaddled and has erythromycin on her eyes, so we can't even make eye contact.
Oh,
And now all of a sudden, I'm a new mom,
yeah.
and they're like, "Well, you wanted to breastfeed, like you gotta
Yeah.
breast." And I'm like, I've got all these cords on me, I've got this big wound on my body, and like I'm swollen from all the medication that they were giving me, and like, yeah, I just felt like what. I almost didn't. I wanted to like almost toss her off me. I was like, "What
Yeah.
is going on?" Right? So, there was no immediate skin to skin. There was no like. There was zero connection. And now 7 years. Well, she's 11 now. We've done tremendous healing, but like as she's like getting older and older, I'm like, why am I having such a hard time connecting with this child?
Mm.
And now I have subsequent children now, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on here?
Right.
So I had to like really go back and be like, wow, okay,
Yeah,
it's because of all of that, right?
absolutely. And I've
Yeah.
heard this so often with people who have traumatic birth experiences. They have that baby and it's almost like they don't even want to connect with that baby in that moment because they're so
Hmm.
traumatized that they don't even know what to do. They are literally in like fight or flight. Their adrenaline is so high and
Yeah. Yeah. It's so common. And when you're in it, you can't really understand what's going on,
right,
right?
right.
So, yeah, like it was 7 years before I started, and I had to do some like deep inner healing
Yeah.
to really understand what it was that I was now understanding and like how to actually heal
Mm-hmm.
that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And one thing we wanted to elaborate on too is, this podcast, we are going to be discussing, birthing in the medical system as well as free birthing, something that Brittany is now doing. But ultimately, this isn't a place where we are trying to look down at people who want to birth in the medical system. I personally think you should birth where you feel the safest. I birthed within the medical system with both of my children. I did birth at home, but I did birth with midwives, and I felt safe doing that. But I did know going into that I would need to advocate for myself. And
Mhm.
so I set myself up in a certain way to make sure that I was ready to advocate for myself, and that involved educating myself, making sure that I knew exactly what I wanted and what I didn't want, and that I had the studies to back that up because I knew that I would be approached on those things that I
Mhm.
said no to. And if I'm sorry, I don't want to look stupid,
Yeah.
because you're not going to be taken seriously if you don't have a proper explanation for the reason as to why you're saying no to something. So I had to really do the work to educate myself. And even past that, I hired a doula to
Hmm.
make sure that if there were a situation where I couldn't advocate for myself, that someone was advocating for me. And I had a really good experience. I will say that I still had to advocate for myself. I still had to stand my ground on certain things, but it was done with respect and I was respected. That doesn't always happen. But in my case, it did both times, and it went really well. And I had two beautiful home births. And, I would do it that way again. But that's not everybody's story. And
Hmm.
so it's really great that we have choices, and that those choices can be safe choices as well. And
Yeah.
so you're a doula, and you originally were a doula within the medical system. And so you've probably seen a lot of hospital births or perhaps even home births with midwives. Now, what is your experience with that, and why did you choose to leave that and now go into free birthing? And I think you should explain to our audience, to our listeners, what exactly is free birthing as well.
Okay. Okay. So I actually never I went into my career as like technically a home birth doula.
Right.
I never actually wanted to witness, not that there's anything wrong with it. I knew from my own personal preference that I wanted to keep birth at home. So I have gone to the hospital with a transfer.
Okay.
And I've been with women who have birthed in the hospital, but I haven't actually taken on a mom who is like willingly using the hospital system.
Okay.
So in saying that, the reason that I am here now, I don't know, like that there's a lot of controversy around the word free birth. So
There is.
some people would say that like, yeah,
They think you're gonna like run to a forest and, you know, build a tent and just
yeah,
like free birth in wilderness with like no one there, like, you know, dangerous. That's really what that word comes with, is dangerous
totally.
and stupid.
Yeah, but not only that, that there is a whole free birth community who would say that any mom or any woman that who is attended by a doula or an attendant of sorts isn't free birthing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So they will so they will kind of get very specific on that word.
Okay.
So that is something that our listeners would have to discern for themselves.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so what I was trying to say is the reason I am here now is because I was working in the system with midwives, and I was seeing a lot of the same things that I had experienced in the hospital, and I had heard others experience in the hospital, which was not feeling heard, forced medical procedures.
Yep.
Yeah, just like creating an authority type of figure in the space,
Yeah.
right? Where the woman and the mother is the authority there,
Absolutely.
right?
They really make you believe that you can't make a choice for yourself. The word
Right.
that I hear all the time is they made me.
Right.
I had to. And I'm like,
Exactly.
no one can make you do anything, and you don't have to do anything.
right.
And
It's
once you break
belittling,
that
right?
lie,
Yeah.
once you break that, you realize, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
I have power here. But we have just been living under this spell that literally we
Yeah.
don't have authority. But go on.
Yeah, no, and that's so I was seeing a lot of those things, and it made me really uncomfortable. And I think too because I was also on my own like awakening journey, like spiritually.
Yeah.
So like I feel like our God like really was shining a light on certain things for me specifically, and that might not be someone else's truth, but this was like the truth that I was seeing. So yeah, a lot of the things that I was seeing in the system, even with midwives, were just not something that I felt truly comfortable with as a birth worker, and
Yeah.
not something that I could participate in.
Yeah.
And then it was starting to get even deeper for me because I can really see how the enemy is really infiltrating the birth space, right? So what a better way to pull the family apart than to make a mom feel like her body is broken,
Yeah.
and that she can't feed her baby, and that, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're starting off as a mom and you're feeling those things, and yeah, it's just like it's not setting you up for success.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're going to wonder, like, oh, I can't, why I have to send my kid to daycare. Like they're overstimulating. They're driving me crazy. I'm going to send them to daycare. Oh, they're going to school. You know what I mean? You feel disconnected from them. You want to like kind of like push them away, right? They make you feel uncomfortable. It all goes back to like, yeah, these deep connections, these deep connections and bonds that are made in those pinnacle moments right after birth really set the tone for how you mother your baby.
For how you mother, and not only for your own mental health, but also if you want to have more children.
Yeah.
And, you know, in my opinion, children are a blessing from the Lord. From the Lord, the Bible speaks on that. They are a blessing. They are a gift from the Lord. They're like arrows in a man's hands. And I do feel like, you know, a lot of women go through these very traumatic experiences and then they're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, and like
these are women that wanted large families, and now they're going, they're like, no, I can't do this.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's now like a soul that could have been on this earth. You know, I feel that we all have an assignment here on this earth, but that's a soul now that might not even come to this earth, not to get like too spiritual and deep,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean, from this type of trauma. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. But I think that, when you were talking about watching these midwives and, not being able to partake in the type of ways that they would do things, there's also another element involved in that, in the sense that, I know some midwives personally, and they do actually have very holistic ways of thinking. But once you enter into that system, your hands are tied as a midwife. And
Absolutely.
as a midwife, when you're working under, a certain practice, the woman who is birthing could actually come back and sue you for 18 years after they have that child. So when these midwives are being trained, they are being trained in a specific way to protect that practice. And so when someone that you are taking care of, a pregnant woman, if you don't tell them all of the things that you were trained to tell them, now there's actually a huge liability on you. And again, they could come back for up to 18 years if anything went wrong, and they could sue you. So there are some midwives who practice and they have to say the speech, and they might not believe it, and they may say it in a very gentle way. But then there are other midwives who believe it wholeheartedly, and they will pressure you, and, it might not be the most graceful approach. And so you have to really discern that. And I think, again, like what I was saying before, how you present, your side of things is so important, because I see a lot of women go into the birthing system and they're angry from their experience. They're angry from their past experiences. So they come in ready to fight, ready to stand up for themselves. And then to that midwife, they're just doing their job. And then they have someone come in who's like ready to fight them. And then that creates such an awful dynamic. I can say that with my experience, even both times, especially the second time, when I said no to a lot of things. Like I said no to any ultrasounds. I said no to pretty much every single test. I said no to the Rogam shot. I said no to everything. And they were like, oh my gosh, well, if you don't get this or that, if you don't get an ultrasound, you could have placenta previa, and then it could result in you having, bleeding out, and then you might need blood transfusion, and you don't want a blood transfusion. So if you want to avoid a blood transfusion because you don't want a blood product, because you don't want Rogam, then you should get an ultrasound. And it was just like this cascade of things. And I'm like, okay, slow down, and I actually had to go and get the studies on ultrasounds and the dangers of ultrasounds and what they can do to our DNA and to our cells over generations. It's crazy stuff if you really look it up. And these are solid studies. And I sent it, and I was like, these are the reasons why I do not want to get an ultrasound. Here are the studies from all these different countries that I have read. If there is a situation where I need an ultrasound because I randomly start bleeding or there's pain, like, yeah, I'm going to go get one. Okay. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to put me and my baby in harm's way,
Right.
But there's nothing wrong here. It's usually, if there is, your body will tell you in some sort of way.
Absolutely.
And I will go and do that.
Right.
But right now, I don't need to.
Yes.
But I said it in a very gentle and kind way and made sure everything was laid out. And once I did that, they really laid off. And then I even went further, and one of my appointments, I even said to them, like, listen, I know that I can come back up to 18 years and sue you. That is not what I'm trying to do. This is what I believe. Like, I'm not trying to challenge you. I understand that you need to say your speech. I'm here to listen. I am open. I am totally open to you telling me your speech of what you need to say, and I will make my decision from there. And they were just really, like, I think they really appreciated that. And so every time we went in, I'd be like, nope, I'm not going to get this. And then they knew that, like, I was okay with the speech. They'd give me the speech, and then I would listen and be like, okay, thank you so much. And then we would move on. And I even wrote out a birth plan, wrote everything I want, and signed it. I'm like, here, I will sign that I said these things to make you feel comfortable. And after that,
Did they make you sign?
No, I did it myself.
Oh,
I did it myself because I wanted a partnership
Mhm.
because, these midwives are going to be partnering with me to do the most vulnerable thing of my life. Like, we need to be a team. We need to support one another. And I wanted to make sure that the environment with all of us was healthy
Right.
and there was trust and there was respect. And
Mhm.
and I did receive that. But I definitely had to stand up and kind of like be that bigger person and
Yeah.
set that stage.
And not
And
everybody's willing to do that.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, right?
And so tell me a little bit about what free birthing is to you,
Mhm.
and yeah, why are you're only doing that now? Because before you said that you would go to home births with midwives, and now you're not doing that at all.
No, no, I stopped attending home births with midwives, and I don't necessarily use the term free birth. I usually use like birthing outside the system,
Okay. Yep.
just because yeah, there's a lot of whatever's
Yeah.
about
I like
that.
that
So
better. I like
yeah,
that better. Yeah.
so yeah, I free birth. There's a lot of women who just choose to free birth at home with their husbands, and or maybe even alone. Like some of them don't even want their husbands around, and they just
Right.
want to have their baby in the comforts of their home.
And do you find that they usually hire someone to be there or no?
Nope, some women will just not hire anyone at all. Others will hire maybe a doula for support. They want like a feminine energy,
Right.
so they will hire a doula to have like some physical and
Right.
emotional support.
And I will
But
add in, I know that not all doulas are able to do out of the system type of births because of certain liability clauses, depending on where they got certified, and also if they have insurance. So from what I've been told, if you are a doula and you want to do that, like some of them, they'll only do it if they have insurance for
Mhm.
liability reasons based on where they got their certification, because that could affect where, I don't know,
Hmm.
with the school that they went to. But so saying that not all doulas will do birthing out of the system, but I think there are a lot out there who are and willing.
Yeah, you definitely want to do your homework if that's
Yeah.
something that you're looking for. Yeah, because that's not something that everyone offers or they're
Yeah.
comfortable with. Yeah. So,
Right. And so you have obviously attended births that are out of the system. And what does that look like? What is your experience with that
hmm.
compared to within the system? I know you've elaborated on, why you wanted to work out of the system based on that freedom of choice.
Hmm.
But what does that look like to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, you get to see a lot of um, different things that maybe you might not see in the system because the way that the model is set up in the system, it doesn't really allow the woman to fall into the real throes of labor.
Mm,
You're always being interrupted. They need to check the heartbeat. They
yeah.
need to do a cervical check. They need to do this. So, yes, we've seen moms have babies that way. I'm not saying that that's not the case,
Yeah.
but you get to see this real primal
Yeah.
energy come from these women, and it's really amazing, and it changes you because it's not
Hmm.
something that you see every day, and it's not something that you see in the hospital. And that's why I feel like a lot of moms that do choose to have like an unmedicated birth in the hospital, they feel shame too, because everyone's like, shh, you sure you don't want your epidural? You're being really loud.
Yeah.
That sounds really painful, right? And it's just
Yes.
like that's not how it's meant to be.
Yes.
Your vocal cords are like opening
Yes.
your cervix, right? So when you're
Absolutely.
roaring and yelling and like really
Mhm.
getting into those
It's like working out.
sounds,
If you're lifting weights, you're like, you know
yeah,
what I
you're
mean? You need to
grunting. Yeah,
release.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're not really given that opportunity in the system, and um outside of the system, you're free to move however you want to move.
Yeah.
You're not tied down to anything. You're not on a time clock. You're just in it. You're just in it. And it
Yeah.
just allows just a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And
In space.
who do you think would be a good candidate for that? Because I think there are a lot of women who would want to birth outside of the system, but there's so much fear
Hmm.
around it because it's like, well, what if this happens? And what if
Yeah.
that happens? what if I need to get rushed to the hospital? What if I don't make it there? Because, you know, that's what they're being told.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you say about that fear aspect or the fact that what if something goes wrong?
Mm-hmm. Well, like going back to what you said earlier, you will know if something is going wrong with your body.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to have that deep trust in yourself
Yeah.
and in God, and just like trust that everything is going to go okay. And if something does go maybe not the way that you thought it was going to go, you just need to have full trust that this is the ultimate
Yeah.
journey for you, and there's so much beauty and learning in this. And that's not to sound reckless. I feel like a lot of times when um you talk about birth and death, like some people will think that it's very reckless to or for mothers to like want to birth outside the system
Because
and
they see
be
it as a
okay.
risk. They're
They
like,
s-
you're risking your
but
baby's life.
right, but there is no guarantee that when you walk into the system that you're going to walk away with a
I know.
healthy baby.
Because there's risks there too.
And I feel like there's a false sense of safety there, and that maybe I'm not saying that I feel like it could be a benefit to some, because I do feel like even if it's a false sense of safety, it is safety, and that is
Yes.
allowing a woman's body to
Mm-hmm.
open.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that there isn't something there, but I do believe it is a false sense of safety, and it is giving that savior complex to
Mhm.
your midwife, your OB.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they cannot guarantee your life, and they cannot guarantee your baby's life.
Yeah.
And babies are lost in the system. We don't even know how often that happens because it's not talked about as much as those that are lost outside the system.
Yeah.
Right? That gets like a light shined on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Well, I was actually reading a study a few months ago, and it was talking about how as interventions have gone up since it was like 50 years ago, how there's actually been more deaths within birth than there was 50 years ago. And they make these claims like right now is like the safest time to birth. You know, back in the day, people lost babies all the time and blah, 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 blah. But apparently, if you actually compare those studies, more babies are lost now than they ever were
they are. And the
before.
maternal death rate is higher than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Higher than it's ever been. And it's just shocking. It's alarming what they're trying to get away with, and they're trying to sweep under the rug.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't even.
And they can write anything on a death certificate too. They can write whatever they want. Not to
Absolutely.
go out and be like, saying people are liars, but kind of what we were going back to before, like when you go to the hospital and you think you are, and maybe you are safe. I'll go a little further back. Like birth is psychological, and like I said before, you should go where you feel the safest.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't feel safe, your body's not going to birth because it's not going to feel safe to birth a baby. Like it really is that plain and simple. So you need to go where you feel the safest. And if the hospital is where you feel the safest, then go there. If at home is where you feel the safest, then stay there. But when you go to the hospital, you're pressured. There's a pressure there. And like you said, it's like, okay, it starts off with, let's give you usually induction. It starts off there. Like,
right.
It's you're 37, you're 38 weeks. Let's, you want the baby out, or maybe you're feeling uncomfortable, or maybe you're measuring big, or whatever they tell you. And then before you know it, you're scheduled for an induction. Okay. Now you're, being pumped with this oxytocin that is extremely unnatural. And now you're having these extreme contractions that are way more painful and happening way quicker than they would naturally. You're going from 0 to 100. You can't handle it because you're not having that slow buildup that we normally would need in order to endure. It's like, if you're lifting weights, you're going to start light. You're going to work your way up. But all of a sudden, you're just like lifting the highest pound weight that, is on the table. And so you're in pain. And then you're like, well, I want epidural because I can't handle this. And of course you can. And if you can, you're a champ, but it's hard. And so now you're getting epidural. Now it's slowing everything down. Now you're being, injected with essentially fentanyl, your baby is 2.
Well, that's what is in epidurals. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now the baby's heart rate is slowing down,
That's
you
right.
know, and then it's like, okay, well, you hope now at this point that your baby is going to come quickly. And if it doesn't, now you're on a time clock.
You're
Now,
on a time clock from the moment that you enter.
exactly.
Right?
And
So-
now they're like, this isn't progressing
Yep.
as quickly as we want.
Yep.
Oh, baby's heart rate is dropping.
Mhm.
And you're not understanding that it started with these interventions.
Mhm.
And then before you know it, it's like C-section is now on the table.
Right.
If you
And
don't
then-
progress, now you're being forced to push unnaturally.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes if women really don't want C-sections, now you're getting forceps in the picture. You're getting all these other things. Your cervix isn't fully open. I've heard of people even getting their cervix ripped open, like crazy, crazy stories trying to get these babies out. And then in the end, it's like, we saved your life.
Totally.
We saved you and baby's lives. But it's like not realizing, like, how did this start from start to finish? And would that have happened if you didn't say yes to those interventions? And, you know, it's really not always the fault of the women, because sometimes they just don't know, and they don't know that they need to know.
Right.
You know, you go in trusting, because we've been taught you can trust the medical system. They are there for us, and they save lives, in which they do save lives. You know, there are people who do have serious issues while they're pregnant, and the medical system saves lives. And I am personally thankful for the medical system. There's no bashing on the medical system. But when we are talking about when you are having a healthy textbook pregnancy and birth, do you need to do these interventions?
Right.
Do you need this pressure?
Yeah.
And
does your baby need to be born before 41 weeks?
Exactly.
Right? Like,
Exactly. You know, allow your baby to come when it's ready to come, right? But then it's the fear. It's the constant fear. Oh, your baby's going to be 10 pounds. You're not going to be able to push that baby out. The shoulders are going to get stuck. You need to get a C-section.
Right. Or
you know, your placenta is...
Let's go back to that your stillbirth is a risk. It's like twofold, I guess it is. So they'll always go to that one, but it's like, you don't realize that it's like 1% to 2. Or like, it's like 0.5 to 1.5. It's like, they say twofold, but it's like such a small amount. That's actually not that really big of a deal.
And when you can actually trust yourself, and I know, you know, speaking for myself going into birth, it's like, I'm someone who, I want to know everything. You know, I'm like reading every book, like learning as much as I can. And it really is psychological. Like, if you want to, you know, if you want to birth in the system, and you want to birth at home, you want to birth the hospital, however you want to do it, you need to make sure that your mind is strong going into that. You need to make sure that you prepare. You don't want to just close your eyes and be like, okay, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. I don't want to think about it because I'm scared. And I'm just going to leave it in the hands of the professionals. Because when you do that, you don't set yourself up you don't. If you are going to run a marathon, you're going to be practicing to run that marathon quite frequently to make sure that you're ready. You know, you're not just going to be like, okay, I'm going to run this marathon in a year and I'm just going to show up and start running. Like, good luck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure like that you're, you know, not only physically ready by, you know, keeping yourself healthy, eating the right foods, exercising, even like I explained in my one podcast, I used a Epino, which is no episiotomy. It's like a balloon to, you know,
stretch.
Yep, to help stretch so that, you know, your body can, well, to avoid tearing ultimately. But there's all these different things that we can do. But ultimately, I think the mind is really the most powerful, because as women, we were born to birth. You know, we really were. And that's going to happen whether you want it to or not. You can't stop it from happening, right?
Yep.
But when you believe in yourself, when you truly believe in yourself and you do that mental work and you know you can do it, like you are so powerful, and you're going to have a way better experience than going into that with fear.
Yeah. Yeah. In full transparency, I didn't just go from a C-section to like birthing outside the system. I ended up having midwives with my second, and that was an eye-opener too, because my baby ended up being breached near the end, and I felt so abandoned by my midwives because I was like, wait, aren't you guys supposed to know these things?
Yeah.
Like, aren't you guys trained in breech birth? Like, this is still a normal variation of birth. Like, can't I just have my baby? But they were like, no, no, like, we don't do that. You have to go to the hospital. Are you crazy? Like, what are you talking
Right.
about? So I felt ultimately like pushed into using the hospital system, which I had obviously suffered trauma from.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go back there. Like, I could feel it. It was like everything in my body when I was on my way. I was like, I don't want to do this. But I wasn't of the mindset to just have my baby at home then. So, yeah, I went and had a repeat C-section with that one. And then with my third, which was 4 years later, I'm like doing all the things like you, like reading all the books and listening to all the podcasts. And I've got all the information. And I'm like so zen in my spirituality. And I thought I had like everything for me, right? So I was like, I can do this, no problem. And then again, I'm using I'm using midwives, and I'm starting to feel like they're not trusting my body.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable
Yeah.
because I've had 2 C-sections.
Yeah, that's
They're
where
like,
that's where it comes from.
oh. And then I ended up asking I asked my midwife, I'm like, well, like, how many kids do you have? And she's like, oh, I only have one, and he was born C-section. And I thought it was great. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, you
Well,
need
that's
someone to
not
align with
helpful.
you. Yeah.
You know, like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you had a positive birth experience, but this is not my experience.
Exactly.
And I need you to trust that
Yeah.
I can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this with or without you.
Yeah.
I ended up doing it without her. But
What do you mean you ended up doing it with her?
I ended up transferring care with an OB who was pretty natural minded. Like,
That's
if I
good.
had to say,
They're out there.
they're out there. Yeah.
They're
yeah.
unicorns.
I
but
didn't
they're
get
out
her
there.
for my birth.
Okay.
I had her for my pregnancy. She was amazing. Dr. Luketic in Hamilton. But yeah, the birth was a different story. And that was another, like, I can't go in there again because it was abuse. It really was. It was terrible.
Mental abuse.
And physical.
Yeah.
And physical.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really awful. I even thought about taking legal action on that one.
Wow.
Yeah, it was terrible. And then
I've heard so many stories like this though.
Yeah. So then with my only son after 3 girls, I was like, there's absolutely, like, you could not pay me to go back to use that. Like, that system has failed me so many times.
Yeah.
I'd be stupid to go there. And I have a normal, natural home birth on my bed.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's just like, why? Why were they so scared? Right? Like, my body is capable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And yeah, I'm not saying that that's going to be everybody's story.
Yeah.
I don't want to
but it is a lot of people's stories. And I think ultimately people need that encouragement to, hear stories like yours and know, like, I've been through, this how many times, and then look at her. She had her natural birth and she believed in herself. Like, I can do that too. Like, we can all do that.
Yeah, we can.
But we need to want it, and we need to work for it. And even if you want to birth within the system, like, choose your midwife wisely. You choose your OB wisely. Look them up, see what their background is. Get referrals, like, from other people. But ultimately, like, even when I was choosing a doula, like, I'm looking through their descriptions, I'm reading about them, I'm making sure, like, okay, does this person align with me? Like, I don't know about this person. And the midwife that I chose was a previous doula, and that brought me comfort. And then she also trained with an amazing midwife out in the South, and that gave me a lot of background. Okay, I think I know what type of midwife she is. And she was so encouraging. Like, I would go in and she'd be like, every time, like, oh yeah, you're gonna rock this birth, this baby's gonna come so fast, like, it's gonna be so, like, she was so encouraging. Even during my birth, she's like, let's go outside. Like, I'm walking around bare feet in the grass, like, they're like, do you want to just birth out here? I'm like, we'll go inside, do it in the pool. Like, they were just so relaxed. Like, baby came out hands off, like, just letting me, like, even when my daughter came out, I shared this in my last podcast, she swallowed a bunch of water. And there was also meconium, right? And so I was like, obviously, I'm not going to the hospital, and then she also swallowed water. And the reason why we ended up realizing it was water because I had birth photography, and you could see her take her first breath in the water,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, and so when she came out, she wasn't breathing very well, right? And they like they kept their hands off, and they let me sort it out. Like I'm holding her, I'm rubbing her back, I'm trying to get her to breathe. I'm
Hmm.
praying over her, I'm talking to her, and she let out her yell, and she cleared it up, but they really stood back and let me, and you don't always see that. So I was in a very different situation. I felt very blessed
Yeah.
um to have that, and if you want that, pray for it.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Hmm.
pray for it. You know what I mean? Like, do the work, but ask God to provide that for you. Ask God to provide you with the team that is best for you, the people that are best for you,
Yeah.
for that peace, for that courage, for that strength. We need to pray for that because birth is spiritual.
Hmm.
It's very spiritual, and we need to treat it that way, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And let's not forget too that the maternal medical system is like a multi-billion dollar
Oh yeah.
company, right?
Oh yeah.
They're a business,
We can't forget that.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, they are getting kickbacks
Mm.
for
Oh yeah.
births that are a certain amount of
Yep.
time, or even like if they use certain tools or
Yep. Yep.
medications, like they get kickbacks on all that stuff,
I
right?
was
So,
told that in the Niagara region specifically, that the nurses there are trained to try and get everyone to take epidural.
hmm.
And it's like they're telling them like all the women need it. Don't let them suffer. We want 100% rate epidural in this
And
hospital.
it's like,
Why?
why? Exactly.
You
Yeah,
know?
kickbacks.
Like
Yeah,
what?
money in the pocket. Yeah,
What?
absolutely. So,
There's so
and that's the biggest, that's
many
the elephant in
factors.
the room.
It really is the
Yeah.
elephant in the room.
Well, I
Absolutely.
mean, Satan. This is the
Yeah,
elephant in the
that too, the enemy,
room.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of evil
Yeah.
in this world, unfortunately, and you can find a lot of that evil where there is money,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of go hand in
They
hand,
do.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you really have to keep your eyes open. You really have to advocate for yourself. You really need to know who you are. You really need to do the work. And one thing I will ask as we begin to close here is, what can you suggest for our listeners, going through that trauma? How did you heal from that?
Wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. I think I think prayer
Hmm.
and just asking God, right, was the biggest factor. And I know that that is really difficult for a lot of people who are maybe in, yeah, like a little bit of a spiritual funk, for lack of better words. Like, I understand that that can be very triggering, but I do believe that that is the only way to heal from these things. But there are other modalities that can really help um, simplify the healing, and some like body work would be good because we all store trauma in our body,
Hmm.
right? So I'm also a cranial sacral therapist,
Right.
infants, specialize with infants. So but yeah, we all store trauma in our bodies, so just like releasing that fascia can help
Hmm.
heal our bodies and our mind. um Eating holistically, whole foods, like that is so important, right? I feel like when we're not nourishing ourselves, we can be stuck, like our nervous system is dysregulated, and it's like not allowing our bodies to kind of like let go of those
Yeah,
things, right?
absolutely.
um I'm trying to think of some other things that were
I
helpful.
would say forgiveness is
Forgiveness, yeah.
huge. Forgiving yourself,
Mm.
because sometimes we can put so much on ourselves, and this happened because I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that, or whatever that blame is. Like, forgiving yourself and then forgiving the people
Who maybe
who hurt
inflicted
you.
those, yeah.
And that's a hard one, is
That is
forgiveness. And
the hardest
and
thing.
it's not a one-time thing.
No.
You need to pray and be like, Lord, I let go and I forgive
Mm.
myself, this person, that person.
Wow.
And it's gonna be cringeworthy when you first do it. You don't want to do it. And if you don't feel like it's released, wait a week, do it again. do it again. If you
Mhm.
feel like it's still there, wait a week, do it again. Keep forgiving in your
Or even
heart.
check in like annually too. Like,
Absolutely,
am I
absolutely.
holding on to something?
Because when we don't forgive, we will hold on
Mhm.
to a lot of things. Like there are
Yeah.
so many ways to heal, but I think the very first step to healing is forgiving ourselves and forgiving others, and then everything else we can incorporate physically, mentally, all of those things, even, seeing a therapist if you need to, talking to other women who have been through what you've been through,
That's a
reading
good
those
point.
stories of coming out from the other side, like such as yours,
Mhm.
that's so important.
Yeah, you just touched on a really important point there is community and
Yeah.
a village,
Yes.
right? So that is huge, and that has actually been huge on my journey is just finding other women who have experienced similar things
Yeah.
and are now on the other side of it and are just killing it,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you see them thriving and you see it how they're mothering and it's just
Yes.
beautiful. It's beautiful and empowering.
It is.
Yeah.
It takes a village, but I think so much of us expect that village to come to us. Well, we need to also be that village.
Mhm.
Like we also need to reach out to other people. We need
Yeah.
to allow ourselves to be vulnerable. We need to, like I know for
Make
yourself, like
those
you've,
play
you know
dates.
what I mean? Like it's
Go
it's
to the,
it's
go to the new
hard.
friend's house,
Yeah, do the
right? Go,
awkward
yeah,
thing. Like
yeah,
do the thing that you think you're too busy to do. Like you
yeah.
need to be that village in order to attract that village, in order
Hmm.
to create that village. We all
Yeah.
need to do our part.
Hmm.
So yeah, finding that community is
Hmm.
definitely so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we close here?
yeah, no, I just want to remind like all women that our bodies are capable. And if you have even like an ounce of like, I think I want to try that or I want to do it, like I would just do it. Like I feel like all these worst case scenarios that we try to scare ourselves into
Mm-hmm.
believing these lies, they don't often happen, and there's
Yeah.
always alternatives,
Yeah.
right? So like you can always change your mind too. Like say you want to pursue a more holistic pregnancy and you want to not like decline tests and you can start there and then and reassess. Like there's nothing
So
tying
good.
you down
That's
to
so
that,
good. And
right?
I'll add in, fear is not from God.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is not from God. And when
Yeah,
you read the
absolutely.
Bible, you will see the words do not fear
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Faith over fear, because fear is a strong emotion, it's a strong frequency. Love and faith are so much stronger. So don't let fear rule your life. And I really like what you said about how like nothing is set in stone. For both of my births, you know, just to be safe, like I still had a hospital bag packed.
Mhm.
Like I still had my hospital bag packed just in case, because I don't want to go to the nasty hospital without, my stuff and my snacks and whatever. My water shoes, because I don't want to go in that shower and all of those things. But I still had that bag packed, even though I wasn't planning on using it. And then I had my birth room set up. So if you're, going to be giving birth and you're not sure where you want to go, plan for both.
Yeah.
And then stay home as you contract. And then you can decide, like, okay, do I feel safe here? Do I feel comfortable to do this here? And if you do, stay.
Yeah.
Stay and have your birth. If you
Yeah.
don't, go. But you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to make any decisions
Mm-hmm.
right then and there.
No.
You
And
know?
that's the whole point too about the work that I do is like it's like full mother's authority.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you are making the decisions. Like obviously you hired me because you want this, but I'm not going to sit there like a ball and chain if you're choosing something different.
Yeah.
We're going to have those hard conversations.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like I'm not letting you off the hook
Yeah.
that easy.
Yeah.
But like I'm not there to shame you.
Exactly.
Right? I'm not there to make you feel bad that you're choosing something else.
Yeah.
Now, in hindsight, I haven't had that outside the system though.
Right.
I've had a lot of transfers in the system.
Right.
I've not had that unless there was like a potential medical emergency. I've not had a transfer for pain outside the system.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems that they're much more comfortable. They're allowed. There's nobody's stopping them to
Right.
do those
Yeah.
pokes and prods,
Right.
right? So
Right.
they're just able to have their baby.
Yeah.
And then usually near the end, when they're in transition, they're like, I'm done. And I'm
Right.
like, you're gonna like fly this baby out. And they're like, no, it's terrible. And then they have their baby.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. So it's usually just that simple.
Yeah. And I will say too, in regards to people who are like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? There are so many beautiful herbs and homeopathic remedies
Mhm.
and essential oils that you can have on hand for your
Mhm.
birth, which I had on hand in case things did go south, like because I personally didn't want Pitocin.
Mhm.
So I made sure that I had my shepherd's purse on
Yeah.
hand. If there was hemorrhaging,
Mhm.
I had my tincture of shepherd's purse, and that's what I'm going to take because it works.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Yeah.
Figure out what is the medicinal dose that I need of this herb if something were to go wrong. Write it down on a piece of paper. Give it to someone who you're with so that if that were to happen, they know exactly what to do. That's what I did. I showed my husband, I showed my doula, okay, if this happens, here's all of the tinctures, here's all the homeopathic remedies, and here are instructions
Mhm.
that come with everything.
Mhm.
Even birthing my placenta naturally. It's like I didn't want that to be removed from me. And so I took black cohosh and fenugreek, and that helped to contract my my uterus and just contract in general for the birth of the placenta, and so that could happen quicker. Like, you have other tools. It's just, unfortunately, the system isn't going to tell you about it, and you need to educate yourself on that. Same with homeopathy. If there's a traumatic birth, take arnica.
Yeah.
If your baby is born and there's fluid in the lungs, you can take apis.
Yeah.
Give apis to the baby, and it'll help remove that fluid.
Mhm.
There are so many beautiful things that come from this earth that we can use instead of pharmaceuticals that are safe and are extremely effective.
Yeah.
And again, do your homework.
Well, like in the case of something like a hemorrhage, usually you would judge by how the woman is feeling,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
there's women who can lose like what seems to be quite
Yeah,
a bit of blood,
and they're
and
fine.
they're completely fine.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
like talking
Yeah.
and nursing their baby,
Yeah.
and they're so chill.
Yeah.
But there's other women who lose some blood, but they're not okay.
Yeah.
And they're not okay.
Yeah.
But also, I want to touch that. Like, usually women aren't bleeding out at home.
Mhm.
They're noticing that something's wrong, and they're able to call
Exactly.
and have somebody come
Yep.
and help,
Yep.
right? If that's the case.
Exactly.
Yeah, like that's not
Usually have time,
necessarily
you
you have some time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not always as like fear
Yeah.
crazy as you would make it out to be, right?
Yeah.
Like there's usually a little bit of time. Like obviously if baby comes out and is struggling with some breaths, like that can be scary. And
Yeah.
that is maybe a case where you would want somebody who's like skilled
Yeah.
on hand.
Yeah.
Maybe, but maybe not. You can also learn those skills.
You can learn how to scoop, if there's meconium, you can learn how to scoop that out of the mouth, or there's
Absolutely.
suctions that midwives carry with them, or you can call an ambulance and they'll come right away and they'll give them oxygen and they'll do what they need to do until they go to the hospital. And
Yeah.
obviously that is not, a common thing, but if it does, you do have options and you prepare for those things, right? You don't want to walk in the dark and close your eyes. Like, you want to make sure that you have the knowledge that you need and the
I'm a
tools
huge
that you need.
advocate for that. I want all mothers to like, even if you're birthing in the system, you should know what you're walking into,
Absolutely.
right? So like, why not have the skills?
Yeah.
If you can like learn how to help your baby have safe breath, like,
Yep.
breathe into your baby after, like, why wouldn't you want that
Yeah.
skill?
Yep.
Right?
Know
And
what you're
it's
walking into.
So much you're in tune with your baby
Yeah,
too, so you know what
absolutely.
they can handle, and what they
Absolutely.
can't.
Yeah.
Rather than a stranger
Yeah.
trying to do those same things.
Mhm.
They don't have the hormones that you have that are
Mhm.
helping you feel.
They weren't carrying that baby for
They
9
weren't carrying
months.
that
They
baby.
didn't birth that
So
baby.
it's like you always want to be the first one to try to stimulate your baby, like
Absolutely.
you experienced,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, it's
And I didn't
Yeah,
even
just
stimulate me.
just
Like, I
like-
prayed over my baby. I spoke the name of Jesus over my baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
There are lots of different ways of doing things.
Mhm.
And it's just not black and white. It's just
No.
not black and
it's
white.
very nuanced.
But it doesn't have to be scary, and
No,
you
it
don't
does
have to
not have
have
to be
fear.
scary.
It's actually a beautiful process. It's amazing, and we need to learn to embrace it and
Mhm.
walk in with faith and love, and and believe in ourselves, you
Mhm.
know? And I will make sure that I post Brittany's Instagram on this video if you guys want to hire her as your doula. She also has an amazing tallow
Yeah.
business.
We have a lot of things that wear
Yeah,
a lot
she
of
does a lot
hats.
of things. She does a lot of things. And so I'll make sure I tag all of
Yeah.
that if you guys want to check her out.
Thank
But
you.
thank you for joining us around the kitchen table, and we'll see you next time. God bless.
Thank you.